My friends at Easy Cater are workplace catering pros, helping you find food for everything from daily employee meals to staff meetings and special events. Visit easycater.com/leaderassistant to find out more. What is good, everybody? It's your host, Jeremy Burrows. I'm excited to welcome you to episode 84 of the Leader Assistant podcast. Before I dive in with my special guest, I wanted to invite you to join the Leader Assistant online membership. So the membership includes once a month group coaching / training sessions. It also includes on-demand access to prior coaching training events that we've had in the member-only resource library. It's only $39 a month, or you can buy the annual membership for $399 a year, and that brings it down to $33.50 or something like that per month. So you get a little bit of a discount if you buy the annual membership. Very affordable. You get access to myself and Al Hussein Madhani, my co-founder with the Leader Assistant membership. We have guest speakers and guest training sessions as well, so it's not just us the whole time, but we really dive deep into the relevant topics like compensation, resumes, job descriptions, artificial intelligence, calendar management, email management, remote work, side hustles, leading in the midst of crisis, and anything else that you really need to wrestle with and work through in your career as an executive assistant. And we have a very engaged group. We really dive into specific, unique questions that you all have and that our members are struggling with, and we encourage each other. It's really a great membership that has been going on most of this year now, and it's been really encouraging to see it grow and to see the progress that our members have made. Several of our members have secured compensation increases, new jobs, even in the middle of a global pandemic. So check us out at leaderassistant.com/membership. Again, leaderassistant.com/membership. It's $39 a month or $399 a year. Very affordable when you consider how much training and access you get to top EA professional development coaches and trainers, as well as top EAs around the world, so you can connect with your peers as well. leaderassistant.com/membership.
The Leader Assistant podcast exists to encourage and challenge assistants to become confident, game-changing leader assistants.
Hello again, friends. I just wanted to say a quick note about politics. This episode and this podcast and my mission to help executive assistants is not about politics, and I try not to bring politics into it. So just wanted to encourage you, no matter what side you are on when it comes to particularly American politicians or politics and philosophies, Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever you are, just wanted to encourage you to listen to this episode through the lens of an executive assistant, not a Republican or a Democrat. So as long as you're good with that, then I'm good to start the interview. All right, let's jump in. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Leader Assistant podcast. It's your host, Jeremy Burrows, and today I'm excited to be speaking with Madeleine Westerhout. Madeleine was former executive assistant to President Donald Trump and also the director of Oval Office operations in 2019. Madeleine, how's it going?
Hi, Jeremy. It's going great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, and what part of the world are you in?
I am in Southern California, in San Diego, actually.
Awesome. Well, we're going to jump right in and, just ask you a few questions and get to know a little bit of your story.
Great. Looking forward to it.
So why don't you start off, tell us about when and why you became an executive assistant.
Sure. I graduated from the College of Charleston in 2013, and I moved up to Washington, D.C. right after that with an internship on Capitol Hill. I was told that it would be very difficult to get a job in DC if I wasn't physically in DC. So I secured an internship, moved up there, and once I got moved in, I started applying for jobs. I was looking at jobs on Capitol Hill as schedulers for different congressmen or senators. And then the opportunity presented itself to work at the Republican National Committee. And the position was executive assistant to the finance director. And so I decided to interview for that job. And the woman that would be my boss, Katie Walsh, is about 6 years older than me. And so I was 22 at the time. So she was in her late 20s, and I was just incredibly impressed by her. And we hit it off right away. And I think that is something that's so important as an executive assistant, is to find someone that you really gel well with. And so I hit it off with Katie. She hired me, and I stuck with her for the next 4 years. She became the chief of staff at the Republican National Committee, was very heavily involved in the 2016 presidential campaign. And once Mr. Trump won the election, she gave me an opportunity to either stay with her or do something else. And so I decided to obviously do something else, but that is how I got my first job.
Wow. So had you thought of the executive assistant role before? Like, had you thought of that career before?
I don't think I had specifically thought of that career. I think I moved up to DC. You know, I had just graduated from college, and I was looking at entry-level positions, and this opportunity just presented itself. And I really wanted a job. I was not going to be one of those recent college graduates who was still having their parents pay for everything. And so this opportunity presented itself, and it seemed really exciting. I honestly didn't know too much about what the Republican National Committee did, but once I learned a little bit more about it, it seemed like something that I wanted to be involved in. And again, I was just so, enamored by Katie, and I learned a lot from her, and she was such a great mentor to me. And so throughout my time with her, I probably could have gone on to do something else, to move up or move into a different position. But I just really loved serving her and working for her. And she provided me with so many great opportunities that just continuing to be her assistant was something that I wanted to do.
So when you transitioned into starting to work with President Donald Trump, tell us a little bit about like the day in the life of an assistant at the White House.
Sure, absolutely. So after Mr. Trump won the election, I went up to New York City and spent some time up there and was working on the transition team. And so I did a lot of interviews and scheduling interviews for the president-elect. And he was bringing in, CEOs, members of Congress, everybody, just to kind of interview different people in order to build his cabinet and his senior staff. And I had expected to go into the White House with Katie. Katie was the deputy chief of staff at the White House. And one day she came up to me and she asked me if I had any interest in sitting outside of the Oval Office. And I honestly had no idea exactly what she was talking about, but I said, of course, that sounds pretty great. And the position was available, and that position was executive assistant to the president of the United States. And, that's pretty much the highest level you'll get. And so, of course, I wanted to take on that role and that opportunity. And what's really unique about the White House, especially in a brand new administration, is that we're all on the same page. We're all starting fresh together. And so that was one thing that I think really helped me succeed as President Trump's executive assistant, was because we were kind of both going into this with fresh eyes and starting new together. And so we were able to kind of find our way, and he was, learning how to be the president while I was learning how to be his assistant. And I hadn't spent much time with him before he got inaugurated. So I didn't really know the ins and outs of how he liked things done. But I was able to learn very quickly with him. And, he has so much staff And it is a lot different. I think most executive assistants are used to being the ones who schedule everything and kind of keep track of everything. But the president has an entire scheduling department. So my job was never to schedule all of his meetings, but really to kind of keep the trains on the track. And so that's really what I tried to do, and keep everyone in line, keep everyone where they needed to be, make sure that everyone that needed to be in the Oval Office at a certain time for a certain meeting was there. And it was just constant energy and movement, and it was a very exciting day to day.
So be honest with me, how many times did you get lost in the Oval Office?
So the first time I walked into the White House was Inauguration Day, and I feel very lucky because I was able to kind of step in and get my bearings while the president was still at the parade. And so I walked in and someone brought me to my desk and said, "This is your desk, and behind that door, that's the Oval Office." I was like, oh my goodness, this is pretty unbelievable. So I had a few hours of downtime to kind of get to know the West Wing, but it's a very confusing place. It's a lot smaller than most people think, and the Oval Office is a lot smaller as well. But the West Wing is lots of hallways, lots of doors, lots of rooms that have 3 or 4 doors. The Oval Office has 4 doors. The Cabinet Room has 3 doors. The Roosevelt Room has 3 doors. And so it's very easy to get lost. So those first few weeks, it was definitely just kind of a try to make it to my desk every single day without getting lost.
Did you walk in on the wrong meeting a couple of times?
I don't think I ever walked in on the wrong meeting. Maybe I walked into a meeting at the wrong time. But the one thing about President Trump that I found so encouraging was that he was really easygoing and really good to his staff. And so whenever I made a mistake, he kind of wanted me to correct it, but he never yelled at me. He was never too tough on me. He expected a lot. He expected perfection, but he also understood that people make mistakes and we're all in this together and we're all learning at the same time.
So what's one thing maybe you didn't like about the role?
I think one of the hardest things about being an assistant is that your time is never your own. You're always, going off of someone else's schedule and worrying about someone else. And, especially at the White House, I didn't have set hours. So it wasn't like I got to get into work at 9 and leave at 5. It was really whatever the president's schedule was my schedule. And so sometimes that was, a little bit of an earlier day if he was leaving and going out of town. And sometimes that was a really, really late night. And so that was difficult to never be able to fully have my own time and my own schedule. But of course, that's something that goes along with the job. And I was happy to stay late and work in the White House.
Yeah. So there's probably someone listening who dreams of being an assistant or another role in the White House. How would you encourage them to kind of start working toward that goal of somehow working in the White House?
I think, for me, of course, as a young politico just graduating from college with a political science degree, I, of course, dreamed of working in the White House. But there's no real playbook on how to get a job at the White House. And so in my situation, it was a lot of hard work, but it was also a lot of luck and a lot of kind of being in the right place at the right time. But especially this administration, obviously, I haven't ever worked for any other administration, but this administration has a lot of young professionals and people that are excited about politics. And so I would just encourage people to get to know what you're interested in, whether that be a policy item or if you're really interested in traveling or scheduling. There's so many different roles. And one of the coolest things about the White House is that maybe you're interested in policy, but you're not quite ready to jump into being a policy advisor. You could go be an assistant to someone like a Stephen Miller, who is a policy person. And there's so many different agencies. So there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of opportunities for growth, which I also don't think is something that people realize.
Great. So can you tell us about your kind of transitioning to your book and kind of how that all came about, can you tell us about your off the record mistake and what you learned from losing your dream job?
Yes, absolutely. So about a little over a year ago, it was August of 2019, I went with the president to his property in Bedminster, New Jersey, and we spent about 10 days there because every August there needs to be some renovations in the White House, and you just have to get the first family out of the White House because it's also, it's an office, but it's also where they live. So we were in Bedminster for about 10 days. It was the last day of our trip. And the president was so gracious whenever we traveled with him and always encouraged us to take advantage of the facilities at his property. And so I was enjoying a very rare day off, lounging by the pool. And I had had a couple of drinks and accepted an invitation to an off-the-record dinner with 4 reporters and a White House colleague of mine. And, obviously my job was, as the president's executive assistant, was not to speak to the press and not to engage with the media, which is something that I always prided myself on. I learned very early on that nothing good really came from engaging with the media unless that was your specific role, and it was not mine. But on this day, I had a very major lapse in judgment, and I accepted this invitation to this dinner. And the reporters at the dinner, we're very used to having policy people or different administration officials to talk to, but they had never talked to someone who knew the president and his family so intimately and so well. And I think they really kind of lunged at the opportunity to talk to me. And I was so used to being someone who stayed behind the scenes and really was just, someone who was not ever in the forefront of anything. And that got the best of me. And I said some things at that dinner that I should never have said and that I didn't mean. And that information did not stay off the record. It eventually got back to the chief of staff and to the president himself. And I was asked to resign, which of course I did. And it was absolutely devastating for me because I loved my job and I loved the president and his family. And I was just so disappointed in myself that I had made a mistake. And so when I left, kind of the last thing that I wanted to do was to write a book. There have been so many books about this president and this administration, and I never wanted to be someone who just left and wrote a book. But after a while, I decided that, I wasn't quite ready to jump into something new. And I honestly wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. And so I decided that writing a book would be very helpful for myself personally. And it ended up being very cathartic and was really quite a therapeutic experience. And I was also able to share with people the man behind the president. And anyone who is an assistant knows that their boss has to be kind of one person in public, but then there's this other layer to every single human being, whether they're a wife, a husband, a mom, a dad, a son, a daughter. There's the more personal aspect to everybody. And so I was able to share with people this kinder, gentler side to the president.
So when you worked on the book and everything, assistants, I've been an assistant for 13 plus years. We talk a lot about, the importance of confidentiality. We talk a lot about how oftentimes, since we support people in power, it may not be the president, but there are a lot of different positions of power in our society that assistants support. And a lot of times people they like to be close to power, and they like to kind of have the inside scoop on whoever's in charge and has the power. So a lot of times assistants people will kind of get close to the assistant to try to get close to their executive. So as you said it was cathartic and going through this whole process of owning your mistake and moving forward and all that, how would you what's the lesson learned or the takeaway, the lesson for those listening who they also have people coming to them trying to get the inside scoop from their executive, and they want to be social and have friends, but they find that, okay, I have to kind of keep things close to the chest, and I just can't delve into
absolutely.
that. So any tips on?
Sure. Well, I think one of the things, the president, I was able to speak to the president after I left and apologize to him, and he forgave me. And I think one of the reasons that he forgave me so quickly was because he knew that in my heart, and 9.5 times out of 10, I was very trustworthy, and I did not speak to anybody about anything. Obviously working in the White House is very interesting. And so I'd always come home, and friends and family would just ask very harmless questions, and I would never talk to anybody about anything. And I think, that is something that people respect. And so it might be difficult to not be able to talk about your job, or talk about the person that you support. But I think most people respect that trust in you. And, that's one of the things why I was so disappointed in myself, is because I knew the irony of this situation was that I was someone that was very trustworthy, and I just made a mistake. And that happens to a lot of people. Unfortunately, in this situation, it happened on, a national and even international stage. But I would just encourage people to continue to just keep that confidentiality, keep that trust, because there is nothing that is worth losing the trust of the people that you care about.
Yeah. So what's next for you? Are you excited about the assistant role again someday? Are you kind of shifting gears? Or are you still TBD? I
honestly am still TBD. I think the whole world right now is really an uncertain place, and the coronavirus has impacted a lot of things. And so, the next couple months, I'm just interested and really excited about sharing my book with as many people as possible. But I have always loved supporting others, and I'm not exactly sure what that will look like next. I would love to potentially support another executive, or even support a family that might need, more of a chief of staff for their family. But I'm excited, and I'm open to different opportunities. But honestly, just haven't been able to find the right next step yet.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. It's interesting when, I talk to all these assistants, and then myself as well, like we're just kind of, it's like we're born to want to help others, and
yes.
It's like you can't get away from it. So.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because, one of the reasons that I had a different title at the end of my time at the White House, Director of Oval Office Operations, is because I wanted to, whenever I did leave the White House, wanted to have a role that was not just assistant. But I think people really, really underestimate assistants, because honestly, nothing could get done without a good assistant. But in some, in some fields, that title, unfortunately, is not as respected as much as it should be. And so I kind of convinced the president to basically give me a different title, but told him I'd be doing all of the same things for him, which I did. But yeah, that executive assistant role is something that I'm incredibly proud of. And I think, I worked with a lot of very senior people and their assistants. And honestly, I can tell you, and I'm sure this better than anyone, that the world would not work without us.
I agree. Can you give us a little insight on how because a lot of assistants are trying to get similarly are trying to get different titles for those reasons. Any tips on convincing your executive to give you a different title?
I have been so fortunate to work for people that have encouraged me and empowered me and wanted me to move up. And I can't tell you the amount of times that Katie, my first boss, asked me what I wanted to do next and what she could help me get, like what the next job is. And I told her, like, I want to stay with you. I like being your assistant. I like supporting you. And so I think if you have an executive that is willing to invest in you, then you should take advantage of that. Obviously every situation is different, but maybe talking to your executive about a certain area of the field that you're interested in and sitting in on one meeting a week where you get to learn a little bit more about that field. I think most people want others to succeed. And as long as you continue to do your job and get the work done, I can't imagine that there's anybody who wouldn't want to invest in someone who is up and coming in their career.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Madeleine, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to share a little bit of your story. I'm very excited to share this with the world. What's the best way to get a hold of you or to find you on social media, or should we just encourage people to go to Amazon and pick up your book?
Yeah, Amazon is a great place to buy my book. I also did my own Audible, which is I'm very, very proud of. But I have an Instagram, Madeleine_Westerhout, and my Twitter is ME Westerhout.
Perfect. I'll share those links in the show notes. And yeah, thanks again and have a great one.
Perfect. Thanks, Jeremy. Have a great day.
Thanks again to Madeleine for a great interview. You can check out the show notes at leaderassistant.com/84. Again, leaderassistant.com/84 to find the link to her book and her Twitter and Instagram, as well as a link to our membership, leaderassistant.com/membership, if you want to go directly there and check it out. $39 a month, $399 a year for ongoing training, community, and professional development for executive assistants and administrative professionals. All right, we'll talk to you next time. Have a good one.
Please review on Apple Podcasts. GoBulls.com